Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Colorado Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association Lunch and Learn webinar series. This one is Worker Protection Standard Awareness. I'm Adrian Card, State Specialist in Produce with Colorado State University Extension and founding board member of the Colorado Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. And I'll be your host for today's webinar. And I need to show you some slides that I had intended to do. Hold on one second here. Get my webinar feet back under me. Okay. You guys seeing slides? Great. The CFVGA is a go-to resource for Colorado's fresh fruit and vegetable farmers, connecting Colorado growers with industry, government, academia, and consumers to strengthen and expand Colorado fresh fruit and vegetable production. And follow them on website, Facebook, and Instagram. CFVGA wants to thank its platinum sponsors, gold sponsors, and silver sponsors. All that make all of this programming possible. And we're actually using CFVGA's Zoom account today. And you can find, for growers, on the grower tab of the website, products and services from those particular vendors. Bit of housekeeping before we get started today. Q&A box, we're going to use that in part, but I think primarily we decided in our rehearsal that we'll look for your questions through the chat, and there'll be a series of polls that Sarah and Lisa are going to launch, and you can type in your responses in the chat box there as well. And you are all pros at Zoom at this point, but you know you can resize it to fit whatever size works for you. Our presenters today are from CSU's Colorado Environmental Pesticide Education Program, or CPEP. Lisa Blecker is an extension specialist and CPEP manager, and Sarah Hernick is a pesticide outreach specialist with CPEP. And we'll pass over to y'all. Thank you so much today.
Great, thanks, Adrian. I'm going to start screen sharing, and then I will. Lisa, you can take it away. So just give me a
I want to say that I look like Marilyn Drake because I'm using CFVGA's Zoom account. Here we go.
Thank you, Adrian, for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. I love talking about the Worker Protection Standard and interacting with people who have to comply with it, and providing any kind of compliance and training assistance that we can. So Adrian already introduced us, but here, and we'll close with the contact slide as well, but here's some contact information for us. We have a website, but you could email us at pesticidesafety@colostate.edu. Next slide. So we have a training needs survey. It's also available on our website. So if you have some training needs, you have like a group of employees or what have you, or you need continuing education, this is a really good way to communicate with us what your specific needs are. So if you need continuing education, what are your what are the categories that you need? If you need worker protection standard training, what do you need for how many people? And then we can start a conversation from there. Next slide.
Sorry, it's not clicking. I was like,
I was hoping you were just reading my mind. So this is in general what we would like to talk to you about today. Just an overview of what is the Worker Protection Standard, how it might apply to you in your job, some training requirements, and at the end we'll get to some resources for employees. For employers, and we'll also provide that via email. So you all know that the Worker Protection Standard is abbreviated as WPS, and it's been around since the 90s, but in 2015 it was updated. So some of the changes may be causing you a little bit of heartache. Transition periods are very difficult, but we think it's really important to start with, why is WPS important? Why was it started? Why do we spend so much effort on it? First and foremost, it protects your workers. So just like you would want your children or your parents or any of your other loved ones and family to come home from work healthy and safe every day, workers and their families want that as well. And so under the Worker Protection Standard, they have the right to just that, okay? And, on a business end of things, it's the financially responsible thing to do to comply with the Worker Protection Standard. Providing our workers with the education and the knowledge and the tools that they need to keep themselves safe from pesticides at work is just good for business. Okay, so it's our job through the WPS to help them limit their exposure. And I just want to point out that any large incident or big enforcement action against any farm is bad for all of us. You know, it's bad for the industry. It doesn't look good. So, you know, it will cause you some financial heartache, but also just the visual on it isn't great either. And so you all are probably very well aware. Agriculture is often heavily scrutinized, especially here in Colorado, and in particular, the use of pesticides. So when we're using pesticides, we have to make sure to do it responsibly and protect the people who help us grow our crop. So, and if you're thinking about like a worst case scenario, if you're like a repeat offender, Colorado Department of Ag does have like fining authority. And so they don't use it very liberally. They wait until you're just out of compliance repeatedly, but they have a maximum fining authority of $1,000 per violation. So an example of that would be if you did not train your workers before they went into the field. So you waited a week, for example, that's a violation. And let's say you had 50 workers. So that's a potential fine of $1,000 per violation. So $1,000 times 50 workers that you didn't train. So there are many financial reasons to comply with the WPS, in addition to the human reasons to comply with this. Next slide. So the worker protection standard, the way you all interact with it, I'm guessing primarily is through these annual pesticide safety trainings for our employees. And that, as I mentioned before, there were changes to the worker protection standard just a few years ago. And that's one of the real big changes that causes people a lot of trouble, or it makes it harder for them maybe to do their job. So it used to be every 5 years, but now we train our workers and our handlers every single year. And so that is just a burden on employers. And so that's why we're here trying to help you out with that. So I want to point out that this annual training requirement and the requirements of the worker protection standard can apply to you if you grow your crops organically. So worker protection standard is protecting people who work on an agricultural establishment, meaning in the production of an agricultural commodity. If you are using pesticides, whether they're organic or conventional, the worker protection standard does apply. There are 3 primary goals of the worker protection standard, and throughout the webinar, we'll hit the highlights of each, but here are the goals: to inform, to protect, and to mitigate. Next slide, please. So we want to know, before we talk a little bit more about organic production, do you grow certified organic crops? And so hopefully you can all see the poll. It flashes up in front of you. If you can't see the poll, then give me your answer in the chat. So do you grow certified organic crops? So yes, some of them are organic. Yes, all of my production is organic. No, none of them is organic. Or other, like if you have a response that just doesn't fit in here, let me know in the chat what it is.
So it looks like most people have responded.
Okay,
we're end the poll just for the sake of time and share those results.
Okay, we're a little bit split. So we've got some people who grow certified organic. And so next slide, please. So this is true for everybody, but I jumped ahead of myself. So this is from PERC, the Pesticide Educational Resources Collaborative, and it's kind of like a little bit of a cheat sheet to figure out if you grow organically, does the worker protection standard apply to you? But in the next slide, we'll give you a more hands-on demonstration here. So this is an example of a label of a certified organic pesticide. You can see that up here. It's listed on the OMRI. It's listed by OMRI. But here is the clue. You are all growing crops for or agricultural production, right? You're producing an agricultural commodity. This is the agricultural use requirements box. And you'll find this box on any pesticide that has agricultural uses, whether they're organically certified or approved or not. And so basically, if you have an ag use requirements box, that means you have to comply with the WPS. This is the WPS box. And so with the next slide, we're going to blow up this box just a little bit. So it talks about the worker protection standard. It doesn't tell you all the rules. I mean, there's a book this big to tell you all the rules. Okay. It just says when you're using this pesticide, you have to comply. Okay. It gives you a restricted entry interval of 4 hours. It gives you PPE for early entry workers. So this is your clue that you have to comply with the worker protection standard, including giving that annual training to your workers. Next slide, please. And then I'll hand it over to Sarah, actually.
Maybe. Oh, it doesn't want to go. There we go. It's very touchy. Well, not the opposite of touchy. It's finicky. So, okay. Thanks, Lisa. So as Lisa mentioned in the introductory slides, there's 3 goals to WPS. So I'm going to just go through and give you all sort of a quick and dirty overview of what those goals are and how employers can accomplish those goals by complying with WPS. So the first goal is to inform. So basically, this just means that with WPS, you are informing your employees or employers. I shouldn't assume you all are employers, or anyways, employers are informing their employees of the pesticide hazards that they might be encountering at work and the precautions that those employees can be taking to protect themselves from those hazards. So to achieve this goal of informing employees, employers are required to provide annual WPS training, as well as pesticide product and pesticide safety information for their employees. So who is, yeah, there we go. I apologize. It's very finicky. So who is getting this WPS training? There's 3 different types of employees that are required to receive this annual WPS training. Those are field workers, non-certified pesticide handlers, and early entry workers. So field workers are those employees that are out in the field doing handling or harvesting tasks, or maybe they're doing some hand weeding or possibly watering the plants, something like that. These field workers are never handling pesticides. They don't apply, they're not mixing and loading, they're not organizing the pesticide storage room, they are not handling pesticides. You also have your non-certified pesticide handlers. Those are people who are doing the handling of pesticides. So they're the ones who are spraying, they're using backpack sprayers, they might be mixing and loading. They can also be people who are cleaning or repairing pesticide application equipment. And then your third type of employee who should be receiving this WPS training are your early entry workers. So those are your employees that are entering a pesticide treated area before the restricted entry interval has expired. So if you have field workers, people who are harvesting or doing other tasks like that, you have non-certified pesticide handlers. So that means they don't have a CDA license or certification, or you have people entering the field before the restricted entry interval has expired. You need to be providing all 3 of these employees annual WPS trainings. So we want to ask you all, and Lisa, I can launch this poll. How many of your employees need annual worker protection training? So do you have field workers? Do you have non-certified pesticide handlers? Do you have early entry workers working for you? How many of those people do you think need annual WPS training? Or how many of those employees on your farm fall under those 3 categories? That's a better way of saying it. I'll wait just a couple more seconds. Looks like we're just missing a couple responses, but I'm gonna end the poll because maybe you're not all employers, and I'm making that assumption. I apologize. Okay, so it looks like most of you have 1 to 10 employees who need worker protection standard training. There's one of you who has many employees, 40 or above, who need that training. So that's good to know. Like, keep in mind when you're thinking of your employees, who of these people need this training? Because as Lisa said, it's the law, so you have to be training them, and you need to know who specifically is going to be receiving that training, because you don't want to have someone miss out on it. So anyways. So part of informing your employees, so what your employees will be receiving in that WPS training, you can also reinforce that information that they get in the training by the information that you're required to be posting at your central display. So your central display is a location where all your employees have unimpeded access to certain information. So they have unimpeded access to pesticide safety information, and they're going to be learning about pesticide safety, so decontamination, first aid, proper PPE, things like that in their WPS training, but they can also have that information reinforced by this poster that you can be displaying at the central location. They will also be informed of pesticide applications that are taking place through a number of ways, but you are required to be posting those pesticide applications at the central location. So that would be what type of pesticide you're applying, where it's being applied, and when that restricted entry interval is expiring. And then you're also going to be providing them with pesticide hazard information. So this is where you would supply the safety data sheets for all those pesticide products that have been used on your property or on your farm within the past 30 days. So I just want to pause there and address any questions or comments. You feel free to post them in the chat, and we can address those, but I don't see any so far. So I'm just going to keep cruising because I know we're on a quick time frame. Okay, so the second goal of WPS is to protect. So to protect those employees that are in an establishment that uses pesticides for ag production, right? So that means that employers are required to provide their employees pesticide application notifications, but also PPE or personal protective equipment. So there's a few ways that you can notify your employees or protect them against overexposure to pesticides by letting them know when and where pesticide applications are taking place. So there's a few ways you can do that. You can post a sign, such as this one that you see on the screen with the angry rancher doing the stop face or stop hand, or you can tell them orally or verbally. So you'll know in what manner you need to be notifying your employees based on a few things. So if you're required to post a sign, you're required to post a sign if any of the following conditions are met. So if the label explicitly requires you to post signs, if the restricted entry interval, the REI, is greater than 48 hours for any outdoor pesticide application, or if the REI is greater than 4 hours for any enclosed space application. So that would be if you're making an application in a greenhouse or a hoop house. You're going to know, or the label's going to tell you that in the ag use requirements box. So Lisa had mentioned earlier, the ag use requirements box is the WPS box on the label. And so this is where it's going to tell you if you need to be posting signs. So it might say something about this product requires posting before application, something like that. Or it's also going to tell you what the REI is. So for this instance, it's telling you to go to the directions for use to find the REI. And that's just because this product can be used on many different crops. And so for each crop, it has a different REI. So you can go here and it will either tell you, oh, the REI is this many hours, or it's going to send you to another place to get more specific information. If the REI doesn't meet these hour standards that I've listed here on the screen, and the label doesn't require posting, you may not be required to post signs. And in that case, an oral or verbal notification to your employees telling them when the application is taking place, where it's taking place, when the REI expires is sufficient. But sometimes the WPS box is going to have something talking about double notification. If this is in your ag use requirements box, it's going to say notify workers of the application by warning them orally and by posting warning signs. So that means if you see this in your ag use requirements box, you're required to do both of those things to notify your employees of those applications that are taking place. So you're required to do one of two things when there's an application taking place. But employees are human, right? And they may forget what you said. So that's fine because your central display is going to have that pesticide application information as well. Okay. So you're required to post the pesticide application information at your central display, as well as orally notify your workers or post signs. So there's many different checks and balances that WPS sort of encourages, so that people can find information in a few different areas. Central display is a great place for employees to find more information. Your duty as an employer to protect your employees also means that you provide them PPE, or personal protective equipment, as required by the label. So it's not enough to just throw PPE at them and say, okay, good luck. It's on the label, here's your PPE. It also has to be clean PPE. It has to be working PPE. So you can't give them gloves that have holes in it. You can't give them overalls that haven't been, or coveralls that haven't been washed, or coveralls that have holes in them as well. So make sure that the PPE you're providing is what's required by the label, and it's going to be effective for that person. So, all right. And the third goal of WPS is to mitigate. So basically, this provides employees the resources they need to minimize the effects of an overexposure to pesticides, right? So we want to do everything we can to prevent these overexposure incidents, but we realize accidents happen. We're working with humans. Humans are very fickle creatures, right? Things happen. And so the third goal, mitigate, just means you're providing your employees those resources that they might need in the event of an overexposure to pesticides. So as an employer, you're required to provide decontamination supplies, first aid information, as well as access to medical care. So the decontamination supplies that you are required to be providing your employees are sufficient water for every single employee, as well as sufficient soap, single-use towels, so disposable towels. Reusable towels are not appropriate, they must be disposable. And those decontamination supplies must be within a quarter mile of workers. So 400 meters of wherever those workers are at any time that they're working. And again, I keep talking about the central display, and that's just because the information that you have here is reinforcing many of those concepts that your employees are learning in their WPS training, or the information that they're getting from you about pesticide applications. So the pesticide hazard information, so the safety data sheets that you're required to display at your central display are going to provide hazard information for the product that is being used on your establishment. And so employees can always go to the central display and look up what that information is. They're also learning pesticide safety information, decontamination information during their training, but they can also find the decontamination information at the central display, as well as the appropriate medical facility that they should be going to in the case that they need to be seeing a doctor. And oops, okay, sorry. That is it. I think there's a question in the chat. I'm going to address it. Someone is asking, I apologize, I'm probably going to butcher your name. So I'm just gonna answer the question. It says, if I need prescription goggles, who should I contact? Just my manager or another department? If you need prescription eyewear, I would say talk to your supervisor, and then they can go to another department, or they can figure out where to get that information. So yeah, I would recommend talking to your manager or your direct supervisor, and then they can go from there. Lisa, is that a good answer? Do you have any comments to that?
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I would also say there are sometimes, it sort of depends on what your glasses are like. There are some goggles and also safety glasses that are designed to fit over glasses. So so there's a couple of options for you there. Yes. But when you're applying pesticides that require protective eyewear, then it is your employer's responsibility to provide those for you, even if you wear prescription glasses.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next slide, and Lisa, I'll let you take it away.
So WPS has an anti-retaliation clause in it. So basically, it's illegal for anybody who's an employer to discriminate against any employee who is asking for the protections that they learned about in the training, or calling the employer out, or making any kind of complaints with regard to compliance with the worker protection standard. So if they're not receiving their training, if they're not getting notifications of pesticide applications, they have the right to bring that complaint forward, either directly to their supervisor and get it addressed within the company, or they can take that complaint to the Department of Ag as well. And so discrimination can take many forms. So this includes obviously firing. You can't fire an employee or for making a complaint, but you also can't discriminate against them in other ways or disadvantage them in other ways, such as giving them a later shift, giving them fewer hours, giving them harder tasks, not allowing them to take on higher level responsibilities that they were working towards. So it's illegal within the worker protection standard to discriminate against those employees who are asking for compliance with the worker protection standard. And next slide. So we have some questions for you. And so I hope that you are ready with your fingers. So what are the biggest impediments that you find in your work complying with the worker protection standard? So you're able to answer more than one time, so you can have more than one response. Is it keeping up with the training, record keeping, finding a qualified trainer? Just training takes too long because there's lots of new things in the training. You don't understand all the requirements of WPS, so it's hard to comply. Workers don't do what I tell them to do, or maybe there's something else that you have that's an impediment. And we'd love to hear about that in the chat.
I also just want to point out that these polls are anonymous. So we see how many people have responded, but we don't see who specifically is responding. So your responses are safe. So feel free to respond freely.
It looks like training is driving some of the impediments. So that's good to know. All right, so we have another poll, I think. So when thinking about pesticide safety for workers, what do you want or need help with? So is it training? Is it employee retention of the training material? Because, you're training adults and we have our brains are full and it's hard to get new stuff to sink in. Is it understanding the requirements, the record keeping associated with the trainings, good tips for training adults, or if there's some other impediment or, things that you want help with, please list that in the chat. Yeah, and you can choose as many of these options as you want. So either somebody's thinking really hard about their response, or perhaps we're done responding. So
I'll just end the poll.
So it looks like people are requesting help, or stating that they need help with training and understanding the requirements. We have I would just love to hear about that in the chat. And if you don't want to share with everyone, you can send a chat message just to the panelists as well. Okay. So we want to know, how do you provide, if you're currently providing worker protection standard training to your employees, how do you do that? Is it through video, PowerPoint, workshop, or is there another way? And please let us know in the chat. Looks like it's pretty split.
Yeah.
using a diversity of tactics.
I would love to know what the other training is. We're always looking for creative ways to offer the training, so.
Yeah.
Please share in the chat. Oh, sorry. Okay.
So who on your establishment, at your establishment, gives the worker protection standard training? So is it you? Is it an employee that is a qualified trainer? You don't know, somebody else is in charge of that, or other. So please list in the chat.
So I don't see this as a poll question, so if you all could just respond in the
Oh,
chat
got
to
it.
us, that would be fabulous. Actually,
Okay. Maybe we'll go on to the next poll and we
Yeah.
can continue this conversation after we get through the polls.
Yeah.
So how much time are you typically comfortable with allocating for a WPS training? Is it less than 1 hour, 1 to 2 hours, 3 to 4, 5 or more hours, or other? And then if you could explain in the chat. So just to note, like if you don't see the little icon for the chat, you might see like the 3 little dots that usually is like other or another menu. So you might click on the 3 little dots, and in that menu, you can get the option to open the chat. So if you're trying to chat with us and you can't find the chat, look for the 3 little dots to give you more options.
I'm gonna end the poll, share results.
So it looks like we're dedicating probably on average, or the majority is 1 to 2 hours. It's a good amount of time. All right. So training resources. So what WPS training resources have you used? And most of the ones that we populated the poll with are from PERC, the Pesticide Educational Resources Collaborative. So they have a flip chart, they have a video available on YouTube, but also on DVD. They have a PowerPoint, and maybe you're using something else. Oh, I see a question in the chat. We'll get to that once we're done with some of these poll questions.
I see a couple other responses. I'd love to
Okay.
know what the others are. This is great. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. Pretty evenly split.
Yeah. Maybe we're doing a diversity of resources. Okay. So do we have one more poll, or is
Nope.
it more? Okay.
Just a few
Okay, so
resources.
we'll provide these resources for you. There's the a link to the updated WPS rule if you wanted to verify a few things or figure out how it's worded. Next slide. Oh, this is your slide. Sorry.
That's okay. Take it away. I would
Sure.
just say this is a great resource. It is very thorough. So Lisa and I are happy to chat via phone, via email, whatever, to try and help you, what is happening? Sorry, understand the WPS rules, because it can be complicated and you can question yourself. And so we're happy to be a resource as well. But this does cover all those updated rules from the 2015 changes that you can go in and look at. So, and then PERC is also a great resource. It looks like many of you are using the resources already to do WPS trainings, but you can go onto their website, and this is what their main page looks like, and they have everything under the sun that you could think of. And so if you're an employer, they have their how to comply manuals. They have them in English and Spanish. And then they have all their different training materials. So there's videos, there's PowerPoints, there's their flip chart. They also have handouts and flip charts in multiple languages. So not just Spanish and English. There's like Hmong, and there's a multitude of those. So, and you can download them. They're free to use. So you don't have to get permission. You can just go onto the website, download this resource. So, and then again, Lisa and I have this training needs survey just to get a feel for what you all in Colorado need as producers, as employees, as employers, regarding training. And so you can scan the QR code, or you can click on this link or put it in your web browser. We also have it on our website, which I'll pull up the link to that website in just a minute. But we do offer WPS trainings. So if you need some help, let us know, and we can try to set up a training with you and your team. And we're happy to do that. That's what we're here for. So you can always send us questions and comments at our pesticide safety@colorado.state.edu email. You can give Lisa a phone call. That's Lisa's number. So, and of course, you can always go to our website and find that training needs survey at our website as well. And it looks like Lisa's posting that in the chat as well. So I see there's a couple questions in the chat, so we can address those. If you have any more questions, please feel free to send them in the chat. We have a few more minutes. I know we have to save a minute or two for Adrian. You had a few poll questions. So what would you prefer, Adrian, to do your poll and then address questions, or should we address questions first?
I think we do it simultaneously. We'll go ahead and launch that poll, and folks can just multitask this.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, so I can address John Bing's. You could give me some pronunciation help. I'm just going to be brave here and just try it.
He's the research scientist at Arkansas Valley Research Center.
Oh,
Okay.
great. Okay.
He says, just call him JB.
JB.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
Thanks, JB. Okay, so if we have high school workers working hourly during the summer, should they receive worker protection standard training? And that is a great question. I get it a lot. And the answer is yes. So it's anybody who's working for you in getting some compensation for the work that they do. That compensation could be money. It could be internship credit. It could be a room and board. If they're receiving any sort of compensation, they're an employee and they are required to receive this training. I will say, just be a little bit careful about the tasks that you have them do, because for our handlers and our early entry workers, those are like higher risk employees, because they're more in direct contact with the higher concentration of pesticides. Those employees have to be at least 18 years or older. So field workers, and there's no age minimum maximum, but for the handlers and the early entry workers, they do have to be at least 18 years old. So you have to be careful with that. And then, is there a seasonal or regular training, or is it by request? Mostly by request. I will say, we basically have a standing agreement with the research station here in Fort Collins to do a couple of worker protection standard for the seasonal workers. I would assume, I haven't been asked to go to Ark Valley, so it's not that I'm not going to go, but I would assume there's maybe somebody on staff who traditionally has done that. And so we could either work to train that staff person to give the trainings, or we could visit and give them ourselves. So we could work with you on that kind of thing. Are there other questions?
I wonder, for the benefit, we have several CSU professionals and ag educators in the meeting today, and I wonder, for their benefit, what do you see as the major stumbling blocks for employers implementing the worker protection standard? What are the things that pop out for you as you search across the state and see how they're doing?
Yeah, so I'm fairly new here. I've been here for about a year and a half. So some of my experience that I'll talk to might be from my previous position, where
Sure.
I did something similar.
Probably lots of
And
commonality, right?
very large, heavily agricultural state that uses a ton of pesticides, a literal ton. So a lot of times it's the rules can be complicated, and so they're hard to understand, especially when they change. I mean, the good news here in Colorado is like, we just accept worker protection standard, like we copy and paste it from the Federal Register into our rules, right? So it's not changing that frequently. It changed in 2015, and getting people up to speed with those training requirements is like, and with some of the other changes is a little bit difficult. And so sometimes people find the rules kind of complicated, and when things are too complicated, people kind of zone out. But I will say, you know, some of the things I've heard is that now that we have to do annual training, the workers have, the repeat workers, people are here year after year, like they hear the same thing year after year, and they're not paying attention to the training. So, you know, like, I think that's a valid concern, but I have some, you know, proposals I want to plant some seeds into how to overcome that. I would say, you know, it's fine if you do a quick, you know, annual training, but retraining is really important. So you might have a weekly tailgate, and you just might focus in on one aspect of the WPS training and repeat that. What we like to do, and with my staff in California, is like when we give a training, even if I could handle the training myself, we bring 2 people, because 2 people's voices or in the way they talk and the cadence of it, it's just, it keeps it fresh. It keeps it a little bit different. And obviously Sarah and I take advantage of this here. We just sort of like divide and conquer the work. And so, and you might diversify your training material. So don't always use the video, or don't always use the same video. You might use a PowerPoint or a tailgate training kit or something like that. So that's my 2 cents on that.
It sounds like don't treat it as a checkbox, but try to make it refreshed each year so that people actually pay attention and engage.
Yeah, because I know employers are required to give a lot of like onboarding training, but you know, when you have some training that is focused on health and safety and affects your bottom line and whether or not somebody goes home safe and healthy to their family, it's really important to reiterate that concept. It's really just good for everybody if workers know what they're supposed to do and actually do what they're supposed to do. So in order to protect themselves. So JB says, is there other certified applicator training? So we offer continuing education, like Sarah said, and we don't have any pre-licensed training set up, but not opposed to that. Any other kinds of training that you're interested in? I'd love to hear it. Other questions of the group, from the group?
Well, I'd like to say by our educational outcomes, you guys got high marks. Well done. Thank you so much for coordinating this today, bringing all this content in as we're waiting here in the final minutes for questions to come in. I want to say to our attendees that we have a tremendous resource at CSU, and to tap these wonderful colleagues for the resources they have in play. I think they just skim the surface of how they can support you in their work. So definitely check out their website. There's a ton of content there as well. Any other parting words, Sarah and Lisa?
Thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll hear from you. Feel free to reach out. We like hearing from everybody around the state. So thanks.
Yeah. And if you're going to be at CFVGA, we'll have a booth there and we can, you know, chat more in depth about your particular training situation, or maybe some resources that we can suggest to you. So we'd love to meet you and chat a little bit.
Fantastic. Thanks so much to both of you for coming here today and presenting this great content, and appreciate all the attendees, and look for this video posted in CFVGA's YouTube account. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.